because I want your perspective on each one of them. So we're starting with the broad perspective. The points that were mentioned by Scott were whether the war was legal or illegal. I want you to comment on that. Second, the comparison to Pearl Harbor. Third is whether Iran's nuclear program was an existential threat. So all these three are within, as in one point, the legality of it, or that it's justified. Number two is whether Israel failed to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. And the third one is regime change. Was that an objective? And if so, did it fail?
Right. So let's be serious here for a second. The Islamic Republic of Iran, its regime, has an outspoken official goal, which they have not been hiding. They've been saying it in Farsi for a long time, and that is to annihilate the state of Israel. Up until a few days ago, they had a countdown clock in a square called Palestine Square, and the name of the square is not coincidental, where they were counting down from the year 2040, which they call the last day of what they dubbed the Zionist entity, what I call the State of Israel. They've said numerous times, official statements by the so-called supreme leader, he's not very supreme these days, but Khamenei, and various presidents going back 10, 15 years and until now, various military leaders, head of the IRGC, head of the Quds Force, the previous and the current one, and many other, and of course members of parliament, legislators, heads of the Iranian military. The list goes on and on and on about Iranian officials that have said clearly that they aim to annihilate and destroy the state of Israel, what they call the Zionist entity. So in terms of understanding where we stand, where Israel stands, it's a pretty straightforward situation. Israel is threatened by an Islamic regime. That regime was also on the path of developing nuclear weapons. And there is abundant evidence from the Atomic Agency, Israeli intel, American intel. We can discuss and deliberate details about it, but bottom line, the Iranians were building a nuclear weapons program. They were busy not only enriching to military grade levels, 60 and 90%, they were also weaponizing and experimenting and trying to develop the capacity to turn enriched material into fissile and then turn that into a bomb and then put all of those things together in a delivery system, probably a ballistic missile that they had thousands of before this engagement. And the aim here is pretty clear. They say that they want to destroy and annihilate the state of Israel, and they were trying to develop the means to do so. That's one part. Second part is that Iran has been conducting, and what I might say is a pretty effective strategy of indirect warfare against Israel. They quite cleverly built a series of proxies. The most important one, which failed terribly on the 13th of June, but the most important and powerful and deterring one was Hezbollah in Lebanon. And in addition to that, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, various proxies in Syria up until the time that the regime there fell, and about 20 significant proxies in Iraq, and of course the Houthis in Yemen. What the Iranian regime tried to do was to build that ring of fire around Israel. And on the 7th of October, that ring of fire allegedly exploded or ignited when Hamas attacked Israel unprovoked, killing about 1,300 Israelis, taking 251 hostage, and setting into motion a chain of events that I think culminated on June 13, 2 weeks ago, when Israel struck Iran. And the things are connected. All of the Iranian proxies joined in, some more merrily and more effectively than others. But a year and a half after that fatal act of aggression by Hamas, the Iranian project of proxies is all but destroyed. Not quite yet, and Israel still has work to do. But judging from how they delivered after June 13, very poor military achievements. Hezbollah opted out. They cowered out. The Houthis, they participated. They fired a few drones and 3 ballistic missiles. None of them hit. and no incoming fire from Syria, no significant incoming missiles from Iraq. A few drones were fired, and Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza were busy doing other things, mostly hiding in tunnels as Israeli troops are maneuvering there. So what Israel did on June 13 was, for the first time in a perspective of 25 years, to turn the table and to address Iranian expansionism, Iranian aggression against Israel, and to tell the Iranians that now we're going to deal, and here I come to the part of targets, we're going to deal with three essential aspects of what you, the Islamic Republic, has been busy doing. One is your illegal, clandestine, and highly controversial nuclear weapons program. We, Israel, are going to blow it out of the ground, and we're going to make sure that you never have the ability to build a nuclear bomb or to fire it towards Israel. Two, we're going to attack and disable your offensive capabilities, most specifically your ballistic missiles. And third, we are going to put a heavy dent into your ability to continue to fund terror organizations, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Houthis, and others that are killing Israelis and forcing us to spend much more than we want on national security. Those three goals were the obvious targets. I think I am in agreement with Scott here about one thing, that I think Israel also wishes to see regime change in Iran, but it wasn't the initial target, and it still isn't an official Israeli target. I think it's something that Israel wants to see. I think it's a vision and an aspiration that is shared by many countries in the region, and I think it would be great, but it wasn't an official target, and Israel hasn't really put in any significant effort, except for one evening of strikes at government facilities in Tehran, to see that happen. So to conclude, I would say, the title of our conversation is Who Won the War? Of course, nobody won this war, because it wasn't all out and it wasn't conclusive, and there's still a lot of work to do. If we take stock of the current situation, I would say that militarily, Israel enjoyed tremendous intel, aerial, and operational superiority. The only achievements that the Iranians can claim, if they can claim, is killing 27 Israeli civilians and one off-duty Israeli soldier, and inflicting damage to houses and some national infrastructure in Israel. That is a far, far cry from what Israel has been able to achieve with precision-guided strikes based on live and very accurate intel against specific targets, and that were in very close coordination with what Israel was seeking to achieve. So, to summarize, I think that this is a new Middle East now. This is a new balance of power between Israel and the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic of Iran, its regime, which was vaunted and cast a long shadow of deterrence through its proxy networks before, has been exposed as incapable of defending itself, its airspace, its territory, its senior personnel, its infrastructure, and its most cherished project, which was the nuclear weapons project.
Okay, so that was Jonathan Conricus's response. And first of all, kudos to the host for giving each side the space to speak clearly and at length. It feels like a real debate and not some like CNN jungle fight, so that's refreshing. Now, let's do some fact checking. So I'm probably going to miss some stuff, but let's go in relative order. According to what I've written down here, the Tehran clock, that's a fact. I will post sources for everything in that regard, in terms of fact checking, at the description below, but that is absolutely a fact, and Israel destroyed it even. I believe by 2040, it was predicted that Israel will be destroyed. Number two, Iran's leaders are and have been openly calling for Israel's destruction. Not really not a controversial statement. It's absolutely true. An example is this: in 2015, Ali Khamenei said Israel won't exist in 25 years. So that was about 10 years ago. So I guess we have about 15 years to survive. Now, uranium enrichment is at 60% according to the IAEA in a recent report. So that's enough material for nuclear weapons. At least it's a very close step. It's much more than you need for civilian. usages, and it's very close to get to 90%, which is what you need in order to create a nuclear weapon. So that's true. They are on the path. It's not that they're making the bomb, but they're getting closer to being able to get the bomb. Essentially, it's a subtle difference, but it's that's where we're at. Now, the other fact, the Ring of Fire around Israel. Yes, this is a clear and established strategy of the Iranian regime. I'll post a source, but this is 100% true. But something to really talk about that I think is really missed in this conflict is, there's a deeper moral point here that rarely gets said out loud, but it matters. It cannot be that Israel absorbs all the rocket fire, the terrorism, the internal displacement, while the Iranian regime just remains completely insulated, and their people as well. This is not sustainable. And it's not just. If you want peace, then the cost of war has to be shared. I'm not saying I want civilians to suffer. I'm not advocating anything like that or violation of international law necessarily, or especially when it comes to civilian security and things like that. But the Iranian military, and by extension, the Iranian public, need to understand that their regime is not just resisting Zionism. It's waging war, and war has consequences. And it can't be one way. Israel receives all the bombs, all the suffering, all the destruction. In Iran, they just live on their lives. It cannot be, especially since they are the center of this whole thing. War must, from now on, be a two-way street. That way, hopefully, there'll be some pressure on the government to calm down a little bit. So, until now, Iran has been able to conduct this long-distance war through the proxies, as we mentioned before. So it's an unfair, one-sided reality, and it allows Iranians to live in denial, and they can't live in denial anymore. They need to understand who it is their regime is. The illusion must break, and I believe Israel absolutely did that. I think now Iranian people really understand that if this is going to continue, seeing your city bombed and attacked is going to become a regular part of your life, and they have to ask themselves whether it's something they want to, if they can live with it. That's what it comes down to, in my view. Now, I also want to address something that Ritter said. He basically said that both sides beat the hell out of each other. This is true, and Jonathan pretty much debunked that. Of course, it's subjective, but he made it sound like they're equal, and it's not true. The Israelis caused way more damage to the Iranians than vice versa. In terms of senior Iranian commanders, nuclear scientists, fatalities overall, the amount of facilities that were destroyed, the ballistic missiles, all that. So it's just really not a comparison, but that's I guess in theory you can claim that's also subjective, but I think at least in terms of material, it's clear that Israel caused way more damage. So let's continue.